Welcome back to Consider This, where we are talking about how far is too far. And I think Pastor Dan gave us great insights into this topic. I mean, all of us were kind of confused, and he gave us good guidelines to go by.
Yeah.
Especially that verse, 2 Timothy 2, verse 22. An easy one to remember. And also where he spoke about the passions, the youthful passions.
Yes.
I think sometimes, I know for myself, sometimes you feel bad because you feel this way.
Yeah.
But we've been created to feel this way.
Yeah.
And I think we should know that we've been created that way. And there's an alternative to not just fleeing away from the bad things, but that we should flee towards
Like
the
the
good
love
things.
and the peace.
Yes.
It's nice that he relates the youthful passion with the Bible because it's there. You know,
Yes.
it's an emotion that's already, it's alive in us. So now, how to deal with this is the
Yeah.
problem. And the Bible tells us to flee.
So it's an
from.
active thing that you should do. You
Yes.
shouldn't just sit and say, well, you know, I don't know exactly what. There's an action, there's a command to
Yes,
flee.
yes.
But to flee to what?
Righteousness.
Righteousness. Okay, and how do we flee to that? I mean, let's make it
Sure.
practical.
Yeah.
Okay?
So we're in
How
the
d-
kitchen and we're cooking,
Yeah.
right? And the guy asks me for the salt and he moves into me to get the
Do
salt.
you run to your Bible?
You run.
I mean, what would you do?
Fleeing to
Like,
righteousness.
I don't need the salt anymore.
Fleeing to righteousness should be to turn and see what God would do
Okay.
in that situation.
Okay.
Step back and give him a shout. Say, hey, look.
Yeah, or maybe just step back and just kind of ignore it or something, you know? Or maybe that would be a good time to maybe bring up the question of how far is too far
Yeah.
with him.
With
you know?
him.
Maybe talk about it.
I
and
think
say,
beforehand
what
would
do
be
you
better.
think? Yeah, but I mean, if you're
in the
only in that
situation.
situation now,
Yeah, then maybe.
it reminds me of a story on how far is too far. We kind of like to press the limits and see how far we can go. It reminds me of a story of this man who wanted to hire this driver for his car or to drive him to his house. And he asked the first driver to drive him, and this guy was driving so close to the cliff, and he was telling the guy, can you see how close I'm driving to the cliff? And he got there to his house, and the next driver is also driving even closer to the cliff. And then the third guy, he was driving, and he wasn't even driving to the cliff, he was driving as close to the mountain. And this guy was asking, well, aren't you going to show me how good driver you are? And you're not even showing me how close to the cliff you can drive. And he said, no way, I don't want to drive as close to the cliff. I want to drive as close to the mountain as I can to stay away from the bad things and from the going down from the cliff.
Yeah.
And isn't that the way that you should live, or we
That's
should
the way
live?
we should be driving.
Yeah.
We should be driving more to the mountain than
Yes.
to
Yes.
the cliff. Yeah.
But I think it's good what he said. It's not as rigid as we should say, okay, if we've been going out for 3 weeks now, then we can maybe hug.
Yeah.
Or it might not be as prescriptive, but I think, discuss it beforehand, and like if I'm going to do this now, then it's going to
Yeah,
lead
you
to
need
this.
to know yourself.
I think you should
Yeah,
think
then
about what are the implications.
Yeah.
I mean, if you think about it, like you said, it's not just physically, but it's emotionally. And are you ready to give yourself emotionally to that person? I mean, when you kiss somebody, that's quite intimate. I mean, you're
It
closer.
is.
Is it just nothing to you?
Yeah.
And will you feel empty? And will he feel empty?
Yeah, I like his example of holding the stick because when you hold hands, it's an emotional, but now when you hold the stick, you lose the emotion. So
Yes.
are you trying to get rid of the emotion or are you trying to handle the emotion in a
So
religious manner?
we're still emotional beings, and that will still be there. I think we should just be intelligent in our
Yes,
walk with God and with other people, and think about the implications all of this has on our lives and on their lives.
Right.
And even on our Christian life. I mean, when you go too far, you'll have this guilt feelings, and
Yes.
you'll probably feel estranged from God as
Exactly.
well. And this is definitely something that we can take in our lives. But now consider how you go about to talk to somebody that comes to you about this. How would you say to them? What answers would you give them if we had to think
Sure.
what Pastor Dan
Yeah.
told us? How would you tell that to them?
You need to go back to the Bible. Pastor
Back to the
Dan
Bible.
clearly took us to the Bible.
Yes.
He even brought it with.
Yeah.
He opened it and showed us that 2 Timothy 2 verse 22. The Bible does talk about it. It does
Yes.
recognize that we're young. And it does recognize that there's not only youthful, but youthful passion.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which we need to consider and take into retrospect.
And like you could go to Song of Solomon. But at that time, Solomon was married, right?
Yeah.
So we were speaking about his bride.
So it's actually where you're at at a point of your
Yeah.
life.
Yeah.
I mean, you're different. I mean, obviously, you're not going to look for counsel in Songs of Solomon when you're only starting to date now.
That's true.
I mean,
That would be dangerous.
okay, but when you're married,
When you're in
I
that
mean, then you can kind of go to Songs of Solomon or in any other book and
Yeah.
see.
That's true. I also see that you should be careful how much you give someone else, because we've acknowledged that this is a physical, but it's also an emotional,
Yeah.
psychological thing.
Yeah.
So if I have this boyfriend and I've dated him for 3 months and I give him everything, what's going to happen in the next 5 years?
Yeah.
What am I going to give him when I'm married? Why must
Yeah.
I speed things up and give him
Yeah.
everything, yet I'm not in the situation, in the specific time
Yeah.
yet, you know?
And maybe you want your relationship to grow as well.
Right.
In specific areas, you don't want to rush things, and then your relationship will be just physical,
Right.
and you're so emotionally
Yeah.
kind of depleted.
That's
You
right.
want to grow with that
Yeah.
person in all spheres. You know,
Yes.
grow physically, emotionally,
At the same
and you
level,
can't-
everything.
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly. And you can't go. You can go physically from just one to the other or to the
Yeah.
end in a few minutes, or
Yeah.
you know, but you can't rush the emotional side, and the
That's
emotional
right.
and the physical is linked.
That's right.
So that is also important when you consider this.
It is a complicated issue, and you need to handle it complicated. But at the same time, we need God. When
Yeah.
you're in a situation, you know you can't handle it. Know yourself, so that
Yeah.
you in that specific
Yeah.
situation, just whisper a prayer. He'll come through. He'll
Yeah.
salvage you from the situation.
Or maybe, yeah, like maybe distance yourself if you know this. Yeah,
yeah. If
I gotta go.
But I think it's
Go.
maybe also how far is too far. You want to go as far as you can. I think it's
Yeah.
kind of the society that we live in. We want to live after that thrill and that excitement. So you always want to live on the border, you know, and you want that limit so that you can just go just under it.
That's right. But I remember reading the other day that we look for happiness in the things that we do. But happiness is temporary.
Yes.
We learned in the Bible that happiness is a very temporary feeling. In real sense, we should be searching for joy.
Okay.
So joy
Nice.
is prolonged. It's a
Yeah.
long-lived thing.
Yes.
The longer we hold out, the more joyful we'll be, both in our partner and in God. Yeah.
So we can see here that we can't really follow the world and their prescriptions to what we should do. I mean, they say do what you want, you know. If it
Yeah.
feels good, do it. You know, just if you want to get satisfied, if you want to do this, just go ahead. It's all about you. But we know that we should, you know, kind of think about everything that we are doing for the greater good.
Yeah, glorify God.
Yes,
what you
definitely.
do.
Yes.
Thank you guys for talking with, and thank you for joining us today on Consider This. If you have any questions or queries or anything that you want to maybe send to us, our details are on the screen. If you're sitting there today and you're wondering, man, how far is too far? Just remember that get close to God and follow Him. We are to glorify Him in all our acts and everything that we do. We should go to God and ask Him for guidance, and then also consider where you are at a point in your life. Where's your partner at, and are you there to serve them? Thank you for joining us. Consider This.